ever wondered what actually happens when you create a password? Most systems don't just store it in a file somewhere. There's way more going on behind the scenes. Hi there, welcome to Cybersecurity Dojo. My name's Dave, and today we're talking about password security. We'll look at how passwords are stored, how attackers try to break them, and what you can do to keep your account safe. That being said, let's jump right in. So what actually happens when you create or change a password? Well, most systems don't store your password directly. Instead, they store a hashed version of it. A hash is a one-way cryptographic function, meaning it takes your password and transforms it into a long string of characters. And once your password's hashed, the process can't be reversed to get the original password back. It's designed that way on purpose. So when you log in, the system hashes the password you enter and compares it with the stored version. And if they match, it lets you in. But here's the thing, not all hashing algorithms are created equal. Some older hashing algorithms like MD5 or SHA-1 are considered weak today because of something called hash collisions, where different inputs can produce the same hash. And if that happens, attackers can sometimes guess or generate a different password that still gives them access. Modern systems should be using stronger, slower algorithms like bcrypt, scrypt, or argon2, which are designed to resist brute force attacks. This is important because they slow down each guess, making brute force attacks more time consuming and expensive for attackers. And to make things even more secure, good systems add something called a salt. Not that kind of salt. In cybersecurity, a salt is just a random value added to your password before it gets hashed, to make it even harder for attackers to crack. This helps prevent attackers from using pre-computed lookup tables, also known as rainbow tables, to crack large sets of passwords. So why does this matter? Because when companies don't store passwords securely and they get breached, your password might be sitting in a database as plain text or hashed using a weak algorithm. And that means it could be exposed and reused in other attacks. And we've seen this happen in real breaches such as RockYou, LinkedIn, and many others, where millions of user credentials were dumped online because basic password storage protections weren't in place. If you're curious about how hashing compares to encryption, I covered the differences in a previous video, and I'll drop a link to that in the description of the video if you'd like to check that out. Now that you know how passwords are stored, let's take a look at how attackers try to break them. There are a few common methods, and some of them might surprise you. First, we've got brute force attacks. This is where an attacker tries to guess every possible combination of characters until they eventually get the right one. This method is slow, but if your password is short or simple, it doesn't take long with modern hardware. Next up is a dictionary attack. Instead of guessing random combinations, an attacker uses a pre-built list of common words, phrases, and variations. Things like password 123, QWERTY, secret, or even let me in. Unfortunately, these passwords are still used more often than you'd think. In fact, QWERTY is listed as NordPass's 15th most common password in 2024. Let me in is ranked 143, and while I can appreciate where the users of the password secret are coming from, it's ranked as the 4th most common password overall. Then there's something called credential stuffing. This is where attackers take usernames and passwords from old data breaches like LinkedIn or RockYou and try those same credentials on other websites. This type of attack is extremely dangerous because if you reuse passwords, one breach can put all of your accounts at risk. Another method is phishing, where attackers attempt to trick you into giving up your password by pretending to be a legitimate website, company, or someone you trust, like a coworker. Finally, there's keylogging, a type of malicious software that secretly records everything you type. If it's installed on your device, it can capture your passwords the moment you type them in. The bottom line is, attackers have a lot of ways to go after passwords, and some of them don't even require breaking into a system. They just wait for you to give them up. That's why strong, unique passwords and good password hygiene are so important. So how do you protect yourself from the type of attacks we just covered? It all starts with using strong, unique passwords for every account. That means avoiding common words, names, or patterns, and instead going for longer passphrases made up of multiple unrelated words that you'll remember. Something like purple hippo, pin, shoe is much harder to crack than something like password 123, and it's still fairly easy to remember. You also want to avoid reusing passwords across different sites, because if one gets breached, attackers will try it everywhere. That's the whole idea behind credential stuffing. You might be wondering, how do I know if one of my passwords has been exposed in a breach? That's a great question. That's where a site like HaveIBeenPwned comes in. HaveIBeenPwned is a free service that allows you to look up your email address to see if it's been associated with any breaches. Let's see this in action. So what I want to do is open my web browser and go to the website HaveIBeenPwned.com. And if you want a clickable link, I'll go ahead and put that in the description of the video. So here on the website, there's a box that allows me to type in my email address. Personally, I'm going to use test@gmail.com, but if you're following along, I'd recommend using your own personal email address so you can see if it was associated with any breaches. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that I've got it in here, I can either hit enter or click on pwned, and I could see that unfortunately, my email address was associated in 495 breaches. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of these. So first, at the top of the list, I can see Adobe. So there's two sections here that they break this down by. They've got all of the nitty-gritty details of what was in the breach. However, if you want a too long didn't read version, they've got one right below that just tells you exactly what was compromised. So as far as the details of this breach go, in October 2013, Adobe suffered a breach that affected 153 million Adobe accounts. This included things like internal ID, usernames, email, encrypted passwords, and a password hint that was stored in plain text. And unfortunately, the password cryptography for these passwords were poorly implemented, so the passwords were very quickly cracked. So if I had an account that was associated in this specific data breach, what I would want to do is go log into it and then change my password, preferably using a passphrase, something that's long and complex, but easy to remember. Let's go ahead and take a look at another one. So I mentioned a moment ago the LinkedIn data breach from May 2016. So this specific data breach impacted 164 million accounts, including email addresses and passwords. Unfortunately, a lot of the individuals who were impacted by this breach didn't change their password and reused them in multiple other areas, including high-profile political figures, which allowed threat actors to gain access to their accounts. And they were able to do this because the passwords were stored as SHA-1 hash, which means it was vulnerable to hash collisions, and threat actors were quickly able to crack the passwords. And even worse, these passwords were stored without a salt, meaning there was no random value added to the password before it was hashed, making it even easier for it to be cracked. And then one other thing that I wanted to talk about before we move on is if we go all the way up to the top of the website, there's a notify me section. And if you click on that, what that allows you to do is put your email address in the box here, check the I'm not a robot button, and then click the notify me of pwnage button. So what this is going to do is it's going to send you a notification for whatever email address you put in if it ends up in a data breach that's ingested by HaveIBeenPwned. It's a very cool feature, and I recommend signing up so you stay informed. And with that being said, let's go ahead and jump back into the video. One of the biggest problems with using long and unique passwords across hundreds of websites is remembering which passwords go where. We don't want to write these down because that leaves them vulnerable to compromise if someone gets physical access and they're stored in plain text, meaning they're unencrypted. Fortunately, there's a solution: password managers. Password managers are one of the best ways to securely store strong, unique passwords without having to remember them all. They encrypt your credentials, sync them across your devices, and can even generate secure passwords for you. If you're not using one already, it's absolutely worth checking out. I'll be covering how to set up and use a password manager in an upcoming video, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Even with strong, unique passwords, sometimes it still isn't enough. Why? Because attackers don't always need to crack your password. Sometimes they phish it, sometimes they steal it from a breach, and sometimes it's already out there just waiting to be used. That's where multi-factor authentication, or MFA, comes in. MFA adds an extra layer of protection, usually by requiring something you already have, like a phone or a security key, in addition to something you know, like your password. So even if someone gets your password, they still won't be able to log in without that second factor. It's one of the most effective ways to prevent against account takeovers. And I'll be covering MFA in more detail, including the different types and how to set it up, in an upcoming video. Let's recap. Passwords are your first line of defense, but they're only effective if they're strong, unique, and properly stored. We talked about how password hashing works, the risks of weak or reused passwords, and how attackers go after them using techniques like brute force, credential stuffing, and phishing. You also saw how tools like HaveIBeenPwned can help you stay informed, and how password managers can take the stress out of remembering complex credentials. And even with all that in place, adding multi-factor authentication takes your security to the next level. If you found this video helpful, drop a like and let me know in the comments. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel so you never miss upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.